Hello tanks and tankettes, and welcome to a video about all of the drama that's been happening over the last few days. I did debate doing this, and I'm going to say up front, I think I'll demonetize this one because I'm not here to profit from the drama. I'm not here to make more drama. It's just I've seen quite a lot of disinformation and misinformation about what's been happening exactly. And so I thought I'd try and gather what I know, at least, all into one place and try and put it down in a relatively clear manner. Now, what's been going on? Well, we've had basically Wargaming asking two YouTubers slash streamers slash friends of mine to take videos down. And one was relatively uncontentious, although maybe a little bit, in that with Circon, you know, they asked him to take the video down because he made a joke that was probably not in the best taste, but wasn't meant to be offensive, was just a throwaway joke. And he took it down, and there was no problem, there was no threats, except they did initially remove his community contributor status, and then relented later on when he pointed out, as he said, that, you know, this is kind of like going from 0 to 100, that he'd never had any problems with them before, they'd never issued him with any warnings about anything before, and so to immediately jump to revoking his CC status felt like a complete overreaction. And clearly after a bit of discussion they decided that it would look bad, and so made him a CC again, or they reversed the earlier decision. So that apart from that decision about removing him initially as a community contributor, that's all fairly cut and dried. You know, they asked him to take down a video where he made a joke that, you know, it probably wasn't the best judged, and it was the fact, I'm sure, that he mentioned Victor Kisley's son, which, you know, just saying that makes it sound worse than the joke actually was, honestly. But you know, that I'm sure that crossed a red line for the community team. So okay, that's fine, that's fair enough, that's all done. But then we come to Foch, and some people are already calling this Fochgate. I'm not sure it's a gate exactly, but yeah, this is far more contentious. So there's a little more to get into with what happened to Foch. It stems from another video, one that he made on the Chrysler K. It was a very short video, and it was basically Foch having a rant, and it was a Foch turned up to 11 rant about both the Chrysler K and also how he sees the direction of the game and the kind of creeping pay-to-win element that you could see in the increasing prevalence of imbalanced new high-tier premiums. And I think, honestly, that's something we need to be having a discussion about. The fact that this has kicked it into high visibility, you know, the fact that Wargaming has inadvertently kicked it into high visibility is maybe a slight point of irony in this whole thing. But yeah, I'll maybe address that towards the end of the video. But first, let's talk about what happened to Foch. So he made this rant and was asked to take it down by Phelan from the Wargaming community team, and Foch refused. And you can actually see a transcript, well, not a transcript, you can see the conversation because it was had via text in Discord on the Reddit thread that Foch has put up about this. And the part that is bad for Wargaming is that they then threatened Foch, after he refused to take down the video, with a copyright strike on his channel. Now, they also removed him from the CC program, which is fair enough, that's their prerogative, but it's this copyright strike, this threat of a copyright strike, which is the problem. Wow, my voice is going croaky today, and I don't know why. So, what's a copyright strike, first of all? Well, I've seen a lot of people saying it's a DMCA filing, or it's a, you know, it's a takedown. There's an important distinction to make here. YouTube copyright strikes are not DMCA takedowns in of themselves. They are YouTube's way of being compliant with DMCA takedowns. So they don't have the same legal force, they don't have the same legal implications as an actual full DMCA takedown, but it's YouTube's system of allowing companies to get copyrighted content that they own taken down when it's been uploaded without permission. So in terms of what a copyright strike to your channel actually does, well, one copyright strike would demonetize the channel, and that's where Phelan's comment about, you know, all your other videos would be demonetized comes in. It's not that they were threatening his other videos specifically, it's just that's what a copyright strike would do. 2 copyright strikes limits your video length to 15 minutes, and there's possibly other effects as well. And 3 gets your channel shut down entirely. Now, those of you that remember what happened to Maxwell will know that he basically, like, he had 2 strikes against his channel, one of which he successfully appealed, and the other which he wasn't able to appeal. And basically, he had to go and start afresh. He had to start a new channel. And maybe that's what Foch would have had to do with YouTube as well. But in Foch's case, it maybe, like, Foch basically, you know, he does YouTube content, but his main kind of thrust of his activities online is streaming, and it's the same with Zircon. So I suspect having to start a new channel would have been an annoyance rather than the end of his livelihood, but it still would have been a significant annoyance. So, I mean, the video itself, I honestly think wasn't that well judged in terms of its tone, and he basically did a follow-up video where he said pretty much the same thing, except he went into it a little more and he swore a lot less, and Wargaming have left that video alone. And I think it's honestly how he expressed himself in that original video that really caused the issue for the Wargaming community team. But the thing is, the community team were using words like slander. And this kind of compounds the issue because they felt that as they put it, that Foch was defaming the company. But I don't see that. I don't see that Foch was saying something about Wargaming that's factually untrue. He was giving his opinion on Wargaming and his opinion on the kind of the trend that we've been getting with imbalanced premium tanks, but it's not like he was stating something that was factually untrue as a fact. He wasn't saying Wargaming kills puppies or something like that as a hypothetical example. So threatening a copyright strike on the basis of slander, I mean, threatening a copyright strike is it's kind of the nuclear option, and it's a pretty big thing to do anyway. But to do it on the basis of something that's got nothing to do with copyright protection, that gets really iffy, like really, really iffy. That's the point where a company is basically abusing the system. And sometimes big companies do abuse the system. Total Biscuit, relatively recently, like in the last couple of weeks, basically announced he had ended his boycott of Sega. And if you don't know this story, it was something like 5 years ago that Sega went on a jihad and basically massively abused YouTube's copyright strike system to take down channels that were covering a particular game, including Total Biscuits. And in some cases, you know, the channels were able to survive, but other channels didn't. And the reason they did this, they wanted to improve the search rankings for their own videos on this particular game. So basically, they went and killed people's livelihoods for marketing reasons. It wasn't even that they were like trying to protect the copyright, and people had been doing stuff without, you know, without regard to fair use or anything like that. No, it was completely nefarious, and unfortunately, you know, big companies can do that if they want to, because in a lot of cases, technically, the law is on their side in terms of what they can do with their own copyrighted material. However, fair use does come into this, and the fact that Wargaming is otherwise actually quite lenient. You know, I should probably add at this point that Wargaming is, generally speaking, as a company, very good to YouTubers and streamers, that they basically allow them to use and promote their content. And even as far as the community contributor program goes, this is not Gaijin. It's not you must toe the line or else we will revoke your access. No, they will tolerate people being critical of their content if it's well judged critical content. And that is maybe the issue with Foch's video, that it wasn't maybe that well judged, but he absolutely did not deserve to then get a copyright strike threatened against him, because that's if you actually felt that what he was saying was defamatory, that's not what the copyright strike system is for. That's to protect your intellectual property if people are doing things with it without permission. And all of us basically have permission to use Wargaming stuff on our channels and to monetize stuff with Wargaming's assets. So it all gets very, very iffy. And even then, fair use comes into it, because the only kind of direct assets that were in Foch's video are the clips of Wargaming's World of Tanks footage that he used in the intro for his video, and then indirectly the tank models on tanks.gg, because it wasn't even that he was in Garage in World of Tanks, it was that he was on tanks.gg looking at the armor model. So it's a third-party website using Wargaming assets. So it all gets a bit murky in that regards, and the fact that a copyright strike was threatened, I mean, there's no real justification for it under these circumstances, I feel like. That was a massive overreach by Wargaming, and specifically the EU community team. And it's kind of weird for me to be sitting here talking about this, because I know some of these people, I'm friends with some of these people, but at the same time, this was a massive mistake. And Phelan himself, I mean, one of the things we don't know is that did Phelan have this conversation of his own recognizance, or was he directed to have this conversation with Foch and to remove the community contributor status from Circon? Was there a memo from the WGRU headquarters saying this will not stand? Or we don't know. We don't know. We could speculate all day long and we wouldn't be any closer, but it remains that Phelan is the one that had the conversation, so he's the one in the limelight, unfortunately. And I've met the guy, he seems like a nice guy. And he has a YouTube channel himself, so he knows exactly what a copyright strike is and what it means for a channel. So I don't know, but that was just so massively ill-judged, and of course it has blown up. We've had Jim Sterling getting involved, and Total Biscuit, who I've already mentioned, he's actually tweeted about it as well. So this is Wargaming getting on the radar of people whose opinions matter within the YouTube gaming kind of journalism / critic community, and it's not in a good way. So this has basically it's like one really ill-judged conversation that's blown up into potentially quite a big PR disaster for Wargaming. And this is why you don't mess around with copyright strikes unless there is an actual valid, legitimate reason for making those strikes. This is why you don't pull a Sega. And Total Biscuit eventually was forced to give in, because he felt like in his case that he was actually hurting his viewers by not covering Sega games. But in the end, Sega never apologized. 5 years and Sega never apologized for doing something that was just blatantly wrong and an abuse of the system. So the YouTube system itself is far from perfect, and I think it's better than it was 5 years ago. But this is why it's such a hot topic for YouTubers in particular, because it's publicity that's the best defense against these abuses. And even then, I mean, the reason I think why Jim Sterling in particular has jumped into it and made the video, which wasn't, I think it was more to solicit responses than it was to give a reasoned view of the situation as he saw it, because it was a little reactionary. But that's kind of his style in a lot of ways. And when he actually does go in and dissect these things in detail. You know, he generally does things in a very, like, he doesn't do these things without going carefully over the situation and getting information from multiple sources and things like that. You know, he's not the YouTube equivalent of the Daily Mail or something like that. But yeah, he himself was involved in a lawsuit. Somebody actually didn't like his coverage of their games and their business practices, and they actually took him to court in the US, and he eventually got that dismissed because it was a completely BS lawsuit, but it caused him a hell of a lot of stress and worry along the way. So I can kind of understand why, when it would appear like Wargaming is trying to censor somebody with a copyright strike, that he would be all over that, because this is very much something that's a personal topic for him at this point. So I don't know why Phelan made that threat. I don't know if he was directed to make that threat, but that was a huge mistake. And I think Wargaming has done basically the only thing they can do at this point, and acknowledge that that was a mistake and say that this is not Wargaming's policy, because it never has been before, and it would mark such a massive 180-degree flip around for Wargaming, for them to go from actually being quite a friendly company towards YouTube to suddenly censoring people with the threat of copyright strikes. This is not Wargaming going full gaijin, fortunately. So I'll quickly read out the statement on the official forums by Florian Mental, who is the head of community management for Wargaming EU. So he's fairly high up on the Wargaming EU ladder, and he says, "Hello all. Without preamble, please allow me to clarify one thing which seems to be in the centre of all discussions, which is extremely important to me as head of the community and to Wargaming. We at Wargaming never claimed and will never pursue a copyright strike on public, available or given content based on criticism, negative reviews of content, opinions on content, etc., as long as I'm having responsibility for community management in Europe. The only exception can be content provided under conditions of an NDA." Now, there was a follow-up to that, because a number of people pointed out that actually, no, copyright strikes were exactly what was threatened, and his answer is not entirely satisfactory, to be quite honest. I mean, this is all a start, and you know, they've at least apologised to Foch, which is the bit I'm going to read out now. But yeah, it's like, this is not the best response they could have had, but at least it was a fast response, and it does more or less say, well, you know, this was not something we should have done. So he followed up with, "I understand that my statement can be seen dubious compared to the screenshot posted," referring to the conversation between Phelan and Foch there, "and the threat implied there. However, I want to point out that there was no copyright claim done on Sir Foch, and I assure you it would not have come to that." Well, that's one of those things where we only have their word for that. I mean, Gaijin famously copyright struck a video from, I can't even remember the channel name now, but a rather large, well-known channel that covers gaming stuff, and the CEO was forced to come out and apologise because, as he explained it, an underling had basically pulled the trigger on the copyright strike, and you know, it wasn't company policy, blah blah blah, etc. But the fact is, it happened. You know, it further contributed to that reputation for Gaijin. So, he goes on, "That leaves the questions on our communications yesterday with Sir Foch, where the focus was completely and only on his vocabulary. Unfortunately, the wrong words had been chosen to express the importance of the situation to us, and I apologise to Sir Foch. Censorship was in no way ever the goal. We will certainly learn from the situation, and we will continue to work on the way we communicate." So it sounds like, I mean, you know, 90% of the time you can assume incompetence rather than malice, to put it broadly, and it kind of sounds like that this just was a tremendous screw-up by Wargaming and a couple of individuals in the WG EU office, potentially. And I'm honestly inclined to believe that, but I still think the response is not entirely satisfactory, and it is definitely a black mark against Wargaming generally. It just should not have happened to begin with. If they were unhappy with Foch's video, then a copyright strike was not the thing to wave around in front of him, and it wasn't even applicable in my eyes, and I think in the eyes of many people. That it would have just been straight up an abuse of the Wargaming, or by Wargaming, of the copyright strike system on YouTube. So that's where we're at now. We've had an official apology, and the rest of that response, which you've heard. There's been a bit of an uproar on the forums and on Reddit, as you can imagine. A lot of people not very happy, and I think more importantly, maybe more pertinently, it's also really brought to the forefront this issue, this conversation that maybe we need to have about the balancing of new high-tier premiums. Because it was the Chrysler K for Foch that was the point of contention. It was that broke the camel's back, that particular straw. Because it's not the first premium tier 8 or high-tier premium that we've had that has been an issue. And we've had enough of them now that it starts to look like a trend. So you've got the Patriot, you've got the Liberté, you've got the Defender, you've got the Chrysler K now, and there's maybe even one or two that I think I mentioned the Scorpion G before. I could probably do a whole video on just kind of looking at the recent premiums and seeing which ones are problematic. And the Chrysler K in particular, you know, Foch's criticism was that this is a tank that it doesn't really have any particular weak spots, and much like the Japanese heavies, you know, for a lot of the lower tier tanks, if they want to actually deal with this machine and do damage to it, they're going to need premium ammo, and that the tank itself has relatively weak penetration for a tier 8 heavy, and so if you meet higher tier tanks, you're going to need premium ammo. And so the whole thing starts to, you know, in of itself, if this had just come out, if it hadn't been a part of this trend we've been having, it would still be maybe a bit problematic as a tank. But as part of a trend of tanks that are very, very strong, yeah, it begins to look like a deliberate shift in policy by Wargaming. And it's a far cry from the back in the day old balancing policy of, well, premium tanks are meant to be not as good as a fully upgraded same tier tank, but better than a stock tank. And of course, the big catalyst for that changing was dropping premium matchmaking as a thing. And so some of the tanks, the premiums that we've had come out, have been relatively balanced. Some have actually been a bit weak. You know, things like the 59 pattern, for example. Although generally the weak ones do get buffed over time. I mean, if you look at the FV4 202 when it came out as a tier 8 premium versus how it is now, you know, that has unquestionably improved. But when you get tanks like the Defender and the Patriot and the Liberté and now the Chrysler K that come out in that very strong state, Wargaming is far more likely to improve a premium that's come out that is a bit too weak in some way than they are to nerf one that's come out that's a bit too strong. So the chances of these being rebalanced to be something a bit more reasonable are probably quite slim to non-existent. You know, the last time I can remember that Wargaming specifically nerfed a premium, well, I mean, they've done it once or twice at least to the Type 59, but I think that was after it was already, you know, pulled from sale. But I'm thinking specifically of the Super Pershing, where they knew it was going to be controversial and actually offered people an in-game refund of gold, and I was one of those people that took that. And then later on, they rebuffed the Super Pershing, so it's now somewhat similar to what it was once upon a time. So it's a problem. It's definitely a problem, and it's more a World of Tanks problem than in their other titles. Well, I'm thinking specifically of Warships, because obviously being a Warships community contributor, I also get a look at the incoming premiums for that game. And generally speaking, the premiums for Warships have been a lot more overall balanced. There isn't this same trend going on, so it does specifically seem to be something with World of Tanks. And my own feeling is that it's because we've hit a point in the life cycle of World of Tanks where the chances of having whole new lines of tanks are probably relatively slim, and if they were to introduce lines of tanks, say like an Israeli tech tree, for instance, there would be a lot of vehicles on it that would be similar to tanks that are already in the game. And in the case of an Israeli tech tree, it would be things with different guns, for instance, but it wouldn't be an entirely new line of tanks. You know, the Swedish tank destroyers and or just the Swedish tech tree is probably the last sort of big one that we will have. So maybe they've hit a point where they know that there isn't that new content as a hook for new players and to keep existing players, and so they're hoping that the hook that will keep players interested is this trickle of premium tanks, and that, you know, there's an incentive to get these premium tanks because, hey, look, they're actually really quite strong. So that's just my hypothesis in this case, but it would kind of fit in with this trend and with what we know. And it doesn't exactly tie in with what Foch was saying about, well, you know, it's forcing people to spam premium ammo, which, I mean, if you want to look at it that way, you could see the introduction of the Chinese heavies as tying in with that, and the buffing of the armor on other various tanks as tying in with that. So, yeah, there's various ways of looking at this, but there is doubtless, in my mind, a trend going on here that is a problem. And it's probably something that we need to have a conversation about, and maybe, you know, as a community say to Wargaming, we're not okay with this. Because we've done this in the past, you know, when we had the issue with bundles, with the Rubicon proposed update, where they were going to make stat changes for, or was it crew changes? I can't remember. Like crew buffs on the emblems on your tanks as a way of additionally monetizing the game. You know, in both instances, the community stood up and said, you know, this is a problem, and maybe this is a time when we do, again, need to stand up and say this is a problem, because I think it probably is a problem. So, enough of the drama for now, and hopefully that makes some things clear. I have decided to stay on as a community contributor. I'm not going to walk away over this, given that it doesn't represent a massive change in policy by Wargaming, that it was just a complete and utter foot in mouth moment that absolutely is going to, like, the internet remembers this kind of thing. So I don't doubt that there will be many meetings with lots of people with furrowed brows at WGEU and Wargaming headquarters as a result of this, because I mean, it was the wrong thing to do. They've admitted it was the wrong thing to do, but it should just not have ever happened to begin with. And that is a problem. That was the thing that they initially, you know, that they basically went full nuclear when they had a problem with Foch and Serkon's videos. So yeah, don't ever go full gaijin, Wargaming. Just don't. You never go full gaijin. It's just a bad plan, and it will end badly, and you'll look bad. So hopefully Wargaming has learned a lesson out of this, and I'm sure a lot of people will be watching them very carefully from now on. So I expect there'll be a comment or two under this video. Hopefully everything I've said makes sense and was laid out in a relatively clear manner, and I'm sure you'll let me know if not. You can otherwise hit the like button and sub to my channel if you haven't already, and as always, stay tuned for more.